Hey Seekers, and welcome back to The Hanged Woman. I'm your host Julienne Irons, and in this arc, we're exploring one of the most universal and tender experiences we share as humans, grief. Last week, we were joined by the amazing Dr. Anjali Lafourie, who wove together psychology, mindfulness, cultural practices, and ancestral knowledge in our practical discussion on grief. Today, I am so happy and honored to be joined again by Dr. Burgos, who you might remember from our happiness arc. Dr. Burgos is a physician with extensive knowledge in neuroscience and is going to help us understand the brain-body connection of both the psychological and physiological effects of loss. We're going to talk about how grief reshapes the brain and body, why our responses feel so unpredictable, and what science tells us about building resilience, even in the heaviest seasons. Now, just a heads up, this is going to be part one of a two-part series episode with Dr. Burgos. I mean, she had so much amazing knowledge to share, and I didn't really want to cut any of it. So we have two episodes. And this is the Hanged Woman podcast, where perspective is power. And let's get into it. Hey, fellow seekers. I'm taking a quick pause from the show to share something really close to my heart. And honestly, the only reason you're even listening to this podcast right now. It's Three of Cups. My sisters and I created Three of Cups, an Iron Sisters mission of love, as a space for healing, beauty, growth, and community, because we believe life is meant to be full, rich, and abundant in every way. We offer all kinds of ways to support you. Energy healing, heart-centered art, even marketing that will help you enhance your brand's presence in the world. Because wherever you are in your journey, we want to help you feel seen, supported, and empowered. So if you're looking for something to help fill your cup in whatever way you need, come join us. Follow us on Instagram at 3 of Cups Healing, or explore all of our offerings at 3ofcupshealing.com. Because Seeker, your cup deserves to be full. And now, back to the episode. Dr. Burgos, it is such a gift and an honor to have you back on the show to help us talk through grief. You helped us with our happiness arc, and now I feel like we're coming full circle and talking about grief. Thank you so much for being here with us again.
Thank you. Thank you for having such an excellent topic to cover.
Yes. So we already know about who you are from the happiness episode. Do you want to just give a condensed version for people who might just be tuning in for the first time and hearing about who you are?
My name is Burgos. I went to school for neuroscience and to be a physician. And throughout my 20s and 30s, I came to love deep self-introspection, and that I decided I wanted to understand what that means neuroscientifically in my own personal growth. And I just love all these topics because I think part of my coping skill is to kind of intellectualize, but also it's brought me lots of self-compassion and compassion to others, and I'd love to share that.
Dr. Burgos, to start us off, when most of us think about grief, we think about things like sadness and crying, maybe even withdrawal. But from a neuroscientific perspective, what is grief?
Okay, so grief, generally speaking, we experience that when we lose something or someone. And to truly understand like the science of losing something or someone, it's helpful to first understand the process of gaining the something or the someone. I know it sounds backwards. I'd be doing that all the time. So the brain does work with neurons. Okay. And the neurons are the special cells that people are referring to when we say the nervous system. So for everyone out there, you can look up Allen Institute largest wiring map. And the reason for that is it's an actual real example of what neurons look like in the brain. It looks like a neuron looks like the roots of a plant, like a long centerpiece and lots of itty bitty branches, and those branches have branches, and those branches have branches. That's kind of what a neuron looks like. And every single little branch is releasing chemicals. That's information that travels around your body through chemicals. And it goes to all your organs, your muscles, your heart, your lungs, and we're going to explain how that is a reflection of your emotions when you're grieving. So if you could, Julianne, put your hand up like this. So this is going to be a quick visual of a neuron where the signal starts at the shoulder, it goes down and then out through each of your fingertips would be a chemical release. So chemicals, and these chemicals go to this set of neurons. The chemicals from your index finger would go to another set of neurons. And so that's just a visual so that we can kind of process what's going on.
And for those listening, what I did was I held my hand out and all my fingers are stretched out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the neurons, the different types of neurons are coming from each finger.
Yes. Yes. Let's walk through an example of what the neurons do in daily life, and we'll connect it. Okay, so now imagine you just got a new dog. And so if you're holding your hand out with your fingers spread out, look at your pinky finger, and that's going to represent one of the branches of the neuron. And let's say you named your dog Cinnamon because it's your favorite scent, it's your favorite ingredient for your morning coffee. Okay, so that signal that represents the dog's name is an actual chemical signal that gets released from the neuron, specifically lands on other neurons that are associated with all of your experiences that involve cinnamon. That includes parts of the brain responsible for smell, taste, memory. Pretty cool. Okay, you can bring your hand down. Your ring finger would represent, the next branch of the neuron. It sends signals about your daily routine of getting home from work now that you have a new dog. So as soon as you pull into the driveway, as we all know, your brain decides you got to pee like right now. So you scramble for your stuff and you kind of do your pee-pee dance all the way to the door. You just got a new dog, Cinnamon. And she throws herself on the ground for the belly rubs and insists that you wrestle a shoe out of her mouth while you chase her into the living room, get your shoe. And then finally you can run to the bathroom. But this time there's a dog here. So you bump into the coffee table and Cinnamon is right next to you. And so this whole new routine happens every single day from the day that you got Cinnamon. To the point that your brain actually gives you an extra 2 minutes before you have to pee your pants next time. And what I'm saying is that your brain learned something new. Mm-hmm. Your brain's like, hold up, you can't just run to the bathroom when you get to the front door. You need a little time.
Right.
So that Cinnamon can get the attention. And then the other cool thing that happens that your brain does for you is that now every time you bump into that coffee table and you have like a bruised leg, well, that muscle remembers. It like knows that it's about to happen again. So what happens to that muscle right before you make it to the coffee table is that it tenses up. So the trauma of that experience is stored in the body. And then the other thing that happens is that now every time you get home and you're opening the door, the reward and attachment center of your brain knows and begins to expect that dopamine and oxytocin will be released when you open the door because your dog's going to be there. So the brain, what it learns becomes an expectation over time. And then it becomes automatic for you and your brain. You're not thinking about it anymore. You just know the routine. Okay. So Julianne, can you see how just in one day of new experiences with your new neuron that's dedicated to cinnamon, it actually connects to several other neurons in your brain that go throughout the entire thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And then repetitious use of all those neurons is called learning.
Dun, 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 dun.
And of course, over time, things become automatic as we've mastered them. And those neuronal connections are said to become stronger and faster. over the years. So then maybe one sad day, your pet Cinnamon passes away, and these strong connections still exist, even though you have the information in your brain that she just passed away. So those connections that still exist, they haven't changed. And what happens to all those neurons that you've been using every single day for the last 10 years, right? Like your neurons have to unlearn all those connections that they made over time.
Mm.
And the process of unlearning is grief.
Okay, now I need to know more.
Oh, I'm so glad you got the visual. I was like, okay, we got to take a step back so that you can understand why grief is so complicated and it takes so much time.
Yeah.
Yes, and if you happen to go look up the image that I mentioned from the Allen Institute of the neuron network, it's it's so it's like over 200,000 neurons in a tiny itty bitty slice of brain. Over 200,000 in like a square centimeter.
Wow.
So just imagine all of the neurons in your brain that are like connected. They're bonding all the time. So neurons move literally, physically. Just just the way that like a plant that wants a little bit more sun kind of just like angles itself a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
to get just that extra little bit of sunlight. Neurons do that too. They start to retract and then they start to stretch out another way to create new connections.
That was absolutely beautiful and such an amazing way to look at grief and how it works in our bodies. So you've described grief as the brain's process of unlearning. Can you paint us a picture of what that looks like in everyday life?
Yes. Let's use the example with us, the dog Cinnamon. So your brain knows Cinnamon is gone. Let's say that new information is just one neuron, but compare that to all the other hundreds of thousands of neurons that are also associated with Cinnamon. So now you get waves of sudden grief that hit when you're enjoying a sip of your cinnamon dolce latte, putting
Mm.
your key into the lock on your home door, suddenly sad because your brain is expecting something to happen, but you remember like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
Walking into a room where your brain still expects to see cinnamon. And this could go on with all of your senses, your sight, smell, locations, where suddenly you just get a hit with like grief and maybe you just want to cry right then.
Yeah.
Cinnamon isn't there to provide the stimulation to send the signal that is always sent. And the resulting neuronal disconnection hurts.
Is that a physical hurt or is that an emotional hurt?
Both. If the stress from grief is not processed, then we can feel it as pain physically.
Mm.
So both. So your prefrontal cortex, it's the part of your brain that is responsible for rational thought. It becomes less active during grief. So if we're grieving and we have less rational thought, this looks like difficulties with concentration and difficulties with decision making. All the while, our star of the previous show, the amygdala,
Oh, girl.
she becomes overactive.
Mm.
And like the stress response, amygdala. And that explains the overwhelming emotional aspect of grief. And then on top of all of this, the body's trauma of bumping into, in the example, like the coffee table, or the tension in your neck muscles as you hold in anger from all the times Cinnamon got a hold of the new TV remote again, all manifests in physical and psychological symptoms of grief. As we grieve without Cinnamon, we're forcing the brain to build new neuronal pathways without her.
Mm.
And that process is slow, like months, months to years, or a year, a year. And of course, everyone's grief looks different.
Why does it take so long for those changes to happen?
Because it requires repetition.
Ah, okay.
So learning is repetition. And your brain is so cool, Julienne. It is so cool and powerful that when you are repeating something over and over in your life, anything, whether it's a thought or an action, a behavior, whatever, your brain is like, we use this like every day. We're like, she loves using this, whatever it is, phrase or whatever. So your brain actually learns to get there faster and faster and faster. So your brain is like a really powerful car where it's like so precise and it's constantly modifying to make your actions more and more precise based on all the repetition that you're focused on.
Got it.
So if you're focused on positive, healthy coping skills, that's what you're going to make more of. If we're focused on negative, unhealthy thoughts, then that's what we're going to get really good at making even faster.
It's
Isn't that
wild.
crazy?
So,
Yeah.
how does grief actually differ from depression? Because sometimes they truly feel so similar and they look so similar. What's the difference between the two?
That's a really good question. So grief is a natural and healthy response to an identifiable loss, whereas depression is an unhealthy condition that may not have a clear external cause.
Mm.
The painful emotions of grief often come in like waves. You can have positive memories and then suddenly feel sad in relation to the loss. Oh, and also that's related to the brain's reward center, which is unique to grief because the happy memories become rewarding. In contrast, though, in depression, it's consistently negative. It's like truly living in a fog every single day. It doesn't ever get lifted up unless when you're going through treatment, therapy, you learn how to lift the fog. And depression it's known to have like consistent feelings of hopelessness, low desire to enjoy activities. That's because of a dormant reward center
Mm.
in the brain. A person who is grieving generally maintains their sense of self-worth, even if they feel guilt related to the loss. Whereas in depression, which is often accompanied by feelings of like worthlessness, feeling not good enough, excessive guilt that's not associated with anything specific or any single event. The intensity of normal grief tends to lessen over time as the brain gradually begins to reintegrate into daily life again. By the time, especially for like a big loss, like a family member, by the end of 1 year, your brain is like already learned a lot and you still have sad moments, but you're fully functioning in your daily life. You have a brand new routine, brand new neuronal connections, like your brain knows and has learned something new. So your life continues smoothly. Where on the other hand, depression is persistent and it doesn't improve necessarily on its own. And that's also, we can measure it because there's low serotonin, low dopamine. And one of the other things that makes them different is that sometimes a grieving person may have thoughts of death, which are typically related to wanting to be reunited with the deceased loved one. However, in depression, thoughts of death are associated with hopelessness or belief that the pain is unbearable and life is not worth living. An important thing to note is that grief may become depression in vulnerable individuals.
Mm.
And normal grief can evolve into a severe condition known as complicated grief, where their brain doesn't reintegrate back into normal everyday life. And it prevents people from just like functioning how they used to.
We often only think of grief when someone passes away, but you've shared that grief shows up in so many different ways. Last week, during our practical episode, we talked about some of the different types of grief, like anticipatory and disenfranchised grief. What other types of grief exist, and how do they show up in our brain and body?
Good question. The way you picked this topic today is also really neat because it's not focused on bereavement, like when someone passes away. So that leaves space for like the rest of grief, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Grief research is vast. People can get like specialized in just grief for their entire career. Okay, so I'll list the most commonly studied types of grief first, and then some areas that are still like today being studied more. So let's start with traumatic grief, anticipatory, disenfranchised. There's ambiguous loss. There's medical trauma slash injury slash illness related grief. There's migratory grief, like when you go to another country. Collective grief. Other types of grief that are currently still being explored are ecological grief, like when we grieve over lost ecosystems in the environment, lost species,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
get that. Effects of global warming, natural disasters, right? We can also have career grief, friendship grief. One that I think happens more often than we think is loss of innocence or loss of childhood grief.
Mm.
A common one is grief of the empty nest that some parents go through. There's existential grief. Oh, this one's cool. There's digital grief.
What's digital grief?
They're studying this. It's like social media reminders of the lost person or relationship.
Oh, I did not know that had a name.
Yeah. And I think because social media is now so pervasive in culture,
Mm.
it's like a trigger that we're not prepared for because it's like everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's being studied. Ooh, this one's really interesting too. It's grief of the digital self.
What is that?
This one is fascinating. So it's grief from the loss of a digital presence or identity. An example would be like when a video game character is deleted from the game, or an online community that you were part of is shut down.
Wow, that makes sense.
It's just fascinating how like things are changing. I mean, this
Yeah.
wasn't a thing when we were kids.
But it's also fascinating how like we have the umbrella of grief, and then underneath grief are all these other little pockets of types of grief that I never would have thought of. That's fascinating.
It is, it sure is. Enough for it to be so common that they have to do research on it.
Right.
Another one is grief for a could have been future, which is like grief for a desired future that never came to be.
I have that for my life for sure.
Really?
Yeah, for
I know
certain
a good
aspects of my
book.
life.
There's a good book you can read on that.
Okay.
Have you heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah.
The Power of Now.
Oh, yes, I love that book. And
Mhm.
that's actually has really helped me find peace with where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a good one. Another one is grief of a lost belief system. So this could be due to leaving deeply held religious, spiritual, or an ideological belief system. There are some stories with people who say that they left their church for
Hmm.
whatever reason, and you're also losing the entire community, the identity that it brought to you, the meaning that it gave, the purpose it provided. All of these are so interesting, and I wish we had time to go through all of them. But there are some interesting points that come to mind, like with grief of medical trauma, injury, or illness. And that one, there's loss of health, body function, and of course, the accompanied loss of personal autonomy. The sense of self seems to change. And the brain's sense of safety is shattered. So the amygdala becomes dominant, leading to feeling unsafe in one's own body. And studies have found that this grief
Mm.
manifests as chronic pain. You asked me about pain earlier. Fatigue, deep-seated
Yeah.
feeling of betrayal by one's own body. There are some other types of grief that also include a sense of betrayal by one's own body. You could probably come up with some of them, but one is the grief of miscarriage. A common issue that
Mm.
people who've gone through that just makes everything worse for them is that they feel like their healthcare provider was more focused on the physical aspect of their care and were dismissive of the significance of the loss itself. So this community often feels like it's harder to grieve because nobody acknowledges it, like we would when someone passes away
Right.
and we have a funeral and ceremonies.
Right.
Another one would be like grief of infertility, grief of childlessness,
Mm.
grief over body image. An interesting one is undergoing a mastectomy and chemotherapy due to breast cancer. Another interesting one
Yeah.
is transgender body grief, especially at puberty, and the resulting
Mm.
relationship to those body parts and hiding them is very traumatic.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
In ambiguous loss, which is loss without closure, such as grieving for a missing person or a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, the brain is unable to complete the unlearning process that we talked about.
Wow.
The prefrontal cortex, which is where we make decisions and it kind of coordinates your emotions, it gets stuck in a state of like mental discomfort due to holding the two conflicting beliefs. One, that there is an obvious absence of the loved one, and two, that this person is actually still present. Or, like in the case of a missing person, possibly still present. And people
Yeah.
describe that as a sense of like being on hold until there's a resolution, or for some people forever if the person remains missing. Just you just can't
Mm.
ever like complete the grief. And as you can imagine, like this grief process commonly manifests as anxiety and lack of focus. Amygdala, prefrontal cortex, those two brain parts. We're going to talk about those a lot today. Typically, we grieve through cultural practices, like people offer verbal condolences and support. We organize funerals, memorial services, special religious ceremonies, and even like where you work or go to school will provide you with time for bereavement. But as you already kind of covered, like disenfranchised grief is not openly acknowledged or socially supported. For example, these are all very interesting. Immigrant experiences of ethnic discrimination. That's like a such a personal, deep pain that, but no, like we don't talk about it out loud.
Right.
And like
Yeah.
the process of adapting to a new society. And of course, racism, right? And like vicarious racism. So when we're watching someone else experience this trauma, we also go through the emotions and pain with them.
I can only imagine the grief feels heavier if you go to a place where you also don't speak the language and the culture is different from what you know and what you've grown up with. But the language barrier must make it feel extra isolating.
Yeah, and it makes sense why when people come to a new country, they often go to small towns where there's a lot of other people from their country.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Other examples include like miscarriage, infertility, divorce, of course, losing a pet, housing instability, and homelessness. Like we often don't emotionally connect with that, especially here living in LA. There's a lot of it. And I think we as a society try not to connect to that part of ourselves to experience grief about it and with people who are going through homelessness or instability because it's too hard. And we're going to talk about why it's so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. It's how do we function if like every time I walk down the street, I'm seeing it and then it makes me feel the grief. It makes me feel a certain way. It's very difficult to live life that way.
Yeah. And just all the emotions come up.
All the emotions. Yeah.
Another type of grieving that we would have is like for the loss of safety for those experiencing trauma, abuse, and neglect.
Mm.
Like often children who are going through this, like, are we grieving for them and like having ceremonies and rituals to help them as a society?
Right.
It's not exactly. Grieving a loved one who went to jail, uh,
Yeah.
often overlooked. Like, I think like judgment comes around and people don't extend, like when we're judging, we're very amygdala dominant. And when we're amygdala dominant, like we can't feel empathy for
Right.
people who are going through this. Another interesting one is grieving a loved one whose personality drastically changed due to a severe mental illness, like schizophrenia or dementia, which I experienced that. I have a sibling with schizophrenia, and schizophrenia kicks in around the age of 25. So the person
Mhm.
you knew, like, is no longer there, but they're still alive and they're getting treatment. So there's a grieving there where the person's still here, but also like there's no like it's hard to get closure on that they're not the person you knew.
Yeah, my aunt was also schizophrenic, so I can definitely relate to that. When it clicked in place for her, everything was so different.
Hmm. It's hard for the person going through it and everyone around them.
Yeah.
So society doesn't exactly know how to understand and support people who experience, these types of grief. And that lack of validation makes it hard for the prefrontal cortex to do its job of regulating emotions. And people who grieve this way can lead to anger and shame.
Okay, Seekers, I think this is a really great place to take a break. We'll be right back with the episode. Grief changes us, in our hearts, in our bodies, and in the way we move through the world. At 3 of Cups Healing, we created Healing After Loss to support you through life's deepest transitions. Our Healing After Loss workshop is a live, heart-centered gathering led by intuitive energy healer Julienne Irons of Temperance Energy Healing. Together we'll use sound healing, breath work, and gentle movement to release what the body holds and create space for healing. For those who want to go deeper, our Healing After Loss course is a self-paced online program designed to walk you through the many layers of grief, whether you're mourning a loved one, a beloved pet, a miscarriage, infertility struggles, or any major life change. Inside, you'll explore cultural perspectives on death, discover your personal healing medicine, identify triggers, create lasting memories, and learn to weave resilience and hope into your journey. No matter where you are in your process, you are not alone. This is a safe, nurturing space to remember your wholeness and find support in community. Remember who you are and fill your cup at 3ofcupshealing.com. And now, back to the episode. So, for someone moving through disenfranchised grief, like the loss of a pet, the end of an affair, a miscarriage, how can they honor their grief even when society doesn't validate it?
You can honor your grief, validate your experience by creating an experience that makes your grief visible, like honoring, creating something sacred that is meaningful to you, like a ritual that resonates. Learn more about how to express feelings with a therapist, of course. Some people have made online memorial pages, planting a tree, journaling to let the brain process the loss, which is so valuable because remember, your brain learns through repetition. So if you can journal your feelings out, then your neurons are like, oh, yeah, yeah, we have a loss. And then the neurons start to slowly move with repetition of the journaling. For example, let's say after a breakup. Okay, oftentimes people know the breakup is needed, but they still have a confusing desire to continue reaching out to the other person. And that yearning is mixed in with knowing that it's not a good relationship. So let's talk about what you can do in that scenario. You can set time aside to light a candle and then write a letter expressing all the feelings, all the unanswered questions, get them out, and then
Mm-hmm.
take that letter, go to a place in nature where you can privately read the letter, cry, be angry, whatever has to come out, and then shred the letter. And when you feel the need to express more in the future, repeat that whole process. That's an example of like a ritual to help you grieve.
To help your brain unlearn what is causing the grief and relearn a new way of being.
Yes. And in this example, it was the loss of a relationship.
Right. Gotcha.
Good job.
Okay, so understanding the neurons and how they function, what is actually happening in the body and the nervous system when we're grieving? What's going on?
Grief is exhausting. The decision-making part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is so burdened, which explains the forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, feeling like you're in a fog all the time. The stress response is constantly activated, and people often describe like chronically tired, digestive issues, changes in your appetite, changes in your sleep.
And what are some of the less obvious ways grief shows up for us?
The interesting thing about processing grief is that it's really important to safely have the opportunity to safely process the grief and safely feel it deeply. When it's difficult to process these big emotions, people could unknowingly turn to unhealthy coping skills to distract from the grieving. And this is when addictions can be formed with like alcohol, food, even exercise. Like, have you heard of people who are like bodybuilders and then they come out and say, like, I actually do this because I'm really depressed and I can't stop?
Yes.
Yeah. When it goes too far, then it becomes like a solid addiction and people start taking steroids and stuff like that. We talked about this mechanism in the Neuroscience of Happiness episode where we start to depend on dopamine and reward chasing activities. That's what that is.
Ah, yeah.
Another way grief can show up is by having no emotional reaction at all. People call it being emotionally numb. It's kind of like the pain is so big that the brain locks up to protect you from becoming overwhelmed. Some people just immediately go to that place. And one of the things I like about this and to bring compassion to ourselves is that everything your brain does, everything we're going to talk about today, everything it's doing is in effort to protect you. Like, even if you're like bothered by some of the ways that your brain does things, it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. And as we go over these topics today, we're going to talk about how to teach your brain how to do what it's supposed to do better. So just like heads up, there's compassion to be had for ourselves, even if we're suffering inside. Another common expression of grief is irritability and anger. Some people just go straight to anger when something tragic, some kind of tragic loss. Why? Because the prefrontal cortex can't do its job to emotionally regulate.
Yeah.
And this looks like reacting to a level 2 problem as if it's a level 10 problem, such as randomly lashing out at other people over tiny issues.
Right. Let's say we do the work to like get the healing on and we do the things that help rewire the neurons in our brain. Why can grief resurface years later, even when we thought we were done with it? What's that about?
So the toughest part of grieving, especially something really serious, is usually overcome by the end of 1 year, meaning you have at least successfully reintegrated back into your daily life. You found a new rhythm, there's adaptation, there's learning in the brain that's happening. But the overall experience of grief has no timeline or expiration date. And some reasons grief can randomly resurface are from triggers like a familiar scent, a specific meaningful song, going to a specific location, major life events in which the loss is felt very deeply, especially holidays, anniversaries, birthdays. For some people, grief is delayed when it's not processed in the beginning. And it's usually from the brain's protective mechanism to put these feelings on hold, especially if the individual also experienced a trauma that hasn't been processed yet. And it's like both related to the same thing or person.
Okay, Seekers, that was part 1 of our science episode with Dr. DeMarty Burgos. Next week, we're going to dive even deeper into the science behind grief as we explore grief rooted in childhood, collective and generational grief, and how we can heal our grief from a scientific perspective. Y'all, it is such an impactful episode, and I cannot wait to share it with you. I'm Julienne Irons, and you're listening to The Hanged Woman. As always, if you feel inspired, please like, share, and comment so we can keep the conversation going. Until next time, hang in there, seekers.